Always live and always wild. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Africam show. We are always happy to have you on board, and we're starting off with a little bit of birding. Love it. This time of the year is always great to watch storks and herons, like we're seeing right now, moving about in water holes. Oh, this is so lovely. And whenever we get to see yellow-billed storks or gray herons, they usually are at quite a distance. Oh, you've got a kill. Both of them. Now, this is exactly why I was saying this time of the year is perfect for this. But before we get into all of that, let me remind you that we're live and interactive, so you can send through questions and comments. I do love to hear from all of you. Let me know what your favorite cam is, how you're doing. We've had some additions to the cameras here at Africam, so I'm really looking forward to seeing some of those additions. But King's Camp is always a wonderful place. Oh, look at this. This is so cool. Now, I do have a lot of comments coming through, but I just want to finish this thought and just explain to you exactly what's happening at this time of the year. Now, it's the end of the dry season. So soon, maybe we'll get our first rains in October, but November, December, January, February, that's all rain. So right now, all the water that you're seeing in the water holes across the various different cameras are left over from the previous rains. Now, yes, some water holes are helped with a borehole and a pump, but for the most part, lodges like to maintain this kind of rhythm that nature has. So even though they may be pumped, you'll find that they're not exploding and very full. They will allow the dry season to take its toll to an extent. But anyway, what ends up happening when the water is evaporating out of these areas is that the many fish species, like the very many species of other microbes and cyanobacteria or algae, they begin to get concentrated because there's less space, there's less water. Now, that could mean a couple of things for the fish in these environments, in these dams. Like, they can't move away really unless there happens to be a little inlet or outlet somewhere. They can't really move away. And during the dry season, those don't exist anyway. So you're getting a concentration of fish, a concentration of bacteria, and those bacteria, some of them are or they use up a lot of oxygen and release other gases. So that means that the water can, there we go, the water can become anoxic. So a reduced oxygen environment. So the fish can be a little bit slower, they may die. And in a way, that's all part of the natural process of going through seasons. Because the death of one animal, in the natural sense, is a treasure for another, as you can see right here. So these yellow-billed storks are having the time of their lives because almost everywhere they're looking, there's potential prey. And maybe that potential prey is a little slower than usual. Maybe it's not doing very well. So it becomes a feast for all sorts of animals, not just birds. But the thing with wading birds, like these right here, is that this is their primary source of food, and now it's just become easier to catch. But they could be catfish in here that are able to survive the dry season by burrowing into the mud. But they're not going to do that until things get really dire water-wise. So you might even see big catfish flopping about, and that draws the attention of larger predators like leopards, crocodiles. It really becomes a feast for so many animals. I mean, when was the last time we watched a waterhole together and saw at least three different instances of catching fish by birds? I can't remember. And we've been looking at King's Camp for 5 minutes. It's extraordinary. But at the same time, it's not. At the same time, it's just part of the natural ebb and flow of the bush. I got very excited, as you heard, seeing all this happening. Now I can get to some of your wonderful comments. Joshua Drawn, you say, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Joshua. Jack DeBua says, morning, guys. Morning, Jack. Mr. H, UAE 87. Oh, very nice. You would like to tell everyone who's been worried about the white lapwing baby. Okay, so if you didn't join us last week we were looking at a pair of lapwing chicks, and one of them was very, very, very white, relatively, and it's what we call leucistic. Now, generally, leucistic animals don't do as well as those animals that are the regular colors, and leucism is rare. And so Mr. HUAE was just letting us know that that lapwing baby, that leucistic one, is doing well, but he's very, or she is very tiny. And we did notice that last week too, that that particular one was smaller than its clutch mate. But thanks, Mr. HUAE87, just letting us know you've been checking up on that individual, and it is well, even though it is not as big as its sibling. Bowl of Kittens, you say hello, Trishala, and everyone here. Thank you, and a hello to you too. And Mr. HUAE87 updating us. You've got some Arabian coffee and cake. Sounds good. I'm kind of matching you, I think, in a way today. I've got some cardamom tea. A bowl of kittens, you say toast and coffee for me. That sounds like the breakfast of champions. Dear NC, you say good morning from Seattle. You've got your coffee and you're excited for the show, and thanks for being here. It's my pleasure, dear NC. Like I've said to you before, I always miss it when I have to take a break from the Africam community. However exciting the other parts of my work are, I always miss Africam. Oh, look at this. It almost feels frenzied, doesn't it? But I'm seeing them, even if they're not catching fish, I'm seeing them snap their beaks often. That tells me there's a lot of movement. Now, by keeping their beaks open like that, it means that as soon as they feel anything in the very sensitive areas, both around the beak and in the mouth, they can snap it shut. And obviously, that takes a lot less time than feeling something, then opening your beak, then closing it. Oh, two of them looked like they were after the same bit of prey there. Hi, Andy. You say good afternoon, everyone. You'd like to know what I've added to my bucket list lately. Andy, I'm being honest, I haven't had an opportunity to add much, but I may go see some really special animals in Asia next month. But when I'm able to tell you more about that, I certainly will. But they are a bucket list animal for me. Maybe I can give you some clues. There is a species, there are four species of this animal in Africa and four species of this animal in Asia. There you go, Andy. Can you work it out? What am I going to do next month? Zygote, you say namaste, namaste to you too, Zygote. Aussie Jan 2 is in the house. You say good afternoon, coffee break. Of course, we knew it. April Owl says good morning from sunny Connecticut with a berry muffin and coffee with vanilla soy milk. Eager for the show. Well, I think it's been a marvelous start. I mean, while we were chatting, there was another fish that was down the hatch. So they really are getting a bang for their buck here at King's Camp. I also like you to notice the method. They go from the left all the way to the right, turn around, right to left. They don't really move in an erratic fashion unless they're chasing a specific prey item. In their search, whoa, well, that was interesting. That looked like that bird had actually dug that prey out of the sand or the bottom. And it was very dark compared to the fish, which are quite silvery. Now, it could be that it was a tiny little catfish that had been burrowing into the sand, although I think that's unlikely. I think it's more likely that it managed to get a frog. Now, there they go. They'll reach the right, the end, and then they'll turn around and come back towards the left. Very, very methodical. Hi, Karu, you say you have milk and a spoon of peanut butter too. Wow. Oh, there we go. Another fish. Now, those silvery fish, I think they're likely to be tilapia. Tilapia and catfish are probably the most common that we see in the dams. Herbert Hans, you say, hello, young lady, from the bluegrass state of Kentucky in the USA. Hello, and thank you for joining us. Oh, Gert also says, good morning, afternoon, greetings from the Netherlands. You're ready with a tea and a cracker. Very nice. And Joshua Drown, you say, King's Cap has a good photo hide. It really does. In fact, this camera is not far from the photo hide at all. So this is a very similar angle of what you would see if you were in the hide. And if you're wondering what on earth I'm talking about, a hide is a structure that you can literally hide in. But it's usually at eye level to a waterhole. And they kind of build the hide into the ground so that you can get that eye level, which is amazing for photography. So often we call these ones photo hides. But there are other kinds of hides as well. You have hides that are just above ground near dams that are not specifically photographic hides, but rather for birding. Oh, I'd love to see this interaction because this heron has not been too happy with the storks. It chased one away earlier. Nothing too hectic this time. Now they get quite close to the water's edge as well. Wouldn't it be so cool if we could snorkel in here? See what the difference is between those organisms that are living in the very center of the waterhole compared to the edges. Look at that movement with the foot, trying to flush out animals as it moves through. Now, what is also really interesting, I know we're sticking here for a long time, but there's just a lot happening. So what's also really interesting is as they come to the edges of this waterhole here at King's Camp, it's obviously getting shallower, and they're doing more of the foot movements, like the probing with the foot, at these shallower areas. Now, say you were a catfish that was not convinced that this water is going to stick around and you wanted to burrow, or you were clever and you saw that there's some predators around and you decided to burrow into the sand. Or perhaps You are a frog that wants to seek cover in the bushes because the water's just not doing it for you. You'd be at the edges. Oh, it looks like they struck gold there, all three of them. Concentrated. Oh, there you go. Got one. Hi, Mindy. Mindy would like to know, you say, aren't there some bird species that open their wings to create shade while fishing? Yes, the black heron does that. I'm actually not sure if there are other bird species that do that. The black heron's probably the most famous one that you would have seen. I mean, there's been many funny video or meme about the black herons. But what they do is they open up, so they fish just like this. But in order to block out reflection, they put their wings around their heads, so they create an umbrella. Now think about looking at your phone when there's when you're outside and there's a whole lot of sun. There's glare, there's a lot of disruption, and you can't see as clearly. The same thing happens on the surface of water. But birds have excellent vision, but they can't block out the glare and the reflections of the surface of the water. But they're still pretty good at hunting, as you can see. And these storks are not using that method that we know that the black herons do. So you would have also noticed that when you can't see something on a screen outside, what do? You put your hand over it, you try to create some shade so that you can see clearly. And that's exactly what black herons do when they fish in this way, when they cover themselves like an umbrella and then move through the water. Now, I don't know, is that just something that they figured out and is easy? Or are they compensating for maybe potential problems with their eyesight that we're not aware of, or at least I'm not aware of? I don't know. But the only bird species that I know off the top of my head that does this. What do we have moving around on the other side? Ah, never mind. Looks like it's just a Cape turtle dove. Not just, they are also important and special. The other thing with this kind of what's called canopy feeding that we see with black herons when they create that umbrella above themselves, it also could change the behavior of their prey. It could make the prey feel like, oh, the sun is set, the birds are gone. It could also attract fish to a certain area, particularly if it's really bright. Or sometimes fish are just curious and they'd go over to a space that looks different from everything else. That movement of being able to take your wings and put it around your head is not something that is anatomically, nothing is different for a black heron that allows them to do that. So theoretically, these birds could do that too. But either they haven't learned to do that, or they are so successful fishing in the ordinary way that there's no point in changing anything. And now this leads me to another thought. Welcome to the head of Trishala. When black heron juveniles are learning to fish, are they instinctively putting that umbrella above them with their wings? Are they instinctively canopy feeding, or are they learning it from the adults? I find that really interesting because a lot of how, how birds function is a little bit of a mystery in terms of whether it's nurture or nature. When you think about something like bird song, how they learn it, they could potentially be learning it when they are in their shells, learning it from their parents, because they can hear through the shells. And not only that, eggs within a clutch can communicate with each other before they've even hatched. But I remember an interesting study, and it was only one, and it is from, oh, the last time I read this about, I don't know, about 4 years ago, so it may be a bit rusty. But I remember that a part of that study was removing an egg from the clutch before it has hatched, and then getting it to hatch separately away from its parents. And that bird still knew the bird's song. Now, this particular experiment was testing communication between the eggs and through the eggshell. And because we know that parents are often singing and communicating, they concluded that it must have either heard it, the bird song, through the shell, or it's completely instinctual. And if it is, I think that's fascinating. Can you imagine if it was instinctual for you to learn the language you speak? These things are very, very interesting. Ooh. I think I've gone on a lot here, but I do find these things very interesting. Bridget McKinney has jumped on. You say hi, Trishala. Hi, Bridget. Thank you for joining us. What do you say we move on to another camera and see what's happening at a fan favorite? You know where we're going. Up to East Africa to Eldonyo. Oh my goodness. Just when you thought all the action was down at King's Camp in South Africa, no, no. It is packed, and packed with one very special individual as well. There's One Ton at the end with his very magnificent tusks, and of course his companion, One Tusk. Have we settled on One Tusk? That's very much a description of what he is. Now, these two, we often see them together. And of course, we're not going to just ignore the 6 giraffes on the side as well. Now, I was not far from this area a couple weeks ago. I think I was about 2 hours from Oldonyo, and I was so desperate to come through here and maybe see One Ton. But unfortunately, my time didn't allow for it. But luckily, I get to see him through the camera. It was also really interesting because well, for this particular shoot, we were looking for vistas of Mount Kilimanjaro, and it just wouldn't clear up enough for us to see it. So eventually, what we ended up doing was every morning and every afternoon, we check this camera on the Africam website and see whether it looked like it was clearing up or not, to determine whether we should drive to different locations to get that shot. Unfortunately, Mount Kilimanjaro didn't come out for us. And I was secretly encouraging everyone because obviously I just wanted to see One Ton. wonder if we could have a closer look at Wonton's tusks because he was experiencing some discomfort. His right tusk, the shorter one, had a little bit of oozing. There was some blood, but then a couple weeks after I initially was aware of it, the bleeding seemed to stop, but then there were a couple cracks in that tusk. So let's see if we can get a slightly closer look. Oh, and we have an eland making its appearance here. Oh, I must tell you, in fact, this comes back to Andy's question about my bucket list. Andy, for the longest time, I've had a gerenuk on my bucket list. Now, if you're not sure what a gerenuk is, it is a strange looking antelope that's found in Kenya or in East Africa. And they kind of look like an impala whose neck has been stretched like a lot. In fact, they're sometimes called giraffe antelope. Quite obscure looking creatures. But I can tell you that I really didn't expect to just see a gerenuk randomly. And I've been wanting to see one for years now. And there we were, driving in some of the buffer zones or the rangelands in Kenya. And there they were, three gerenuks just staring at me. So that was a good one to get off my bucket list. They are such interesting looking animals, and they kind of feed like goats. If you've ever watched goats feeding, like at a tree, you'd see they kind of stand up on their back two legs. Gerenuks do that too. So that was an amazing one to get off the bucket list. Wow. Hi, Karu. You'd like to know why do some elands have stripes and others don't? Are they different species, or does that mean that they're different ages? Um, they're not different species. The stripes are one of those things that can change depending on regions and even depending on an individual's genetics. The stripes are always there in one way or another, but perhaps they are very light. Others have really distinct white stripes. Perhaps they're also very, very thin. But those kinds of variations are common. You might have a subpopulation that their stripes are so faint because obviously it's a subpopulation, so they're only passing on the genetics for these fainter stripes. Or the opposite, you get a subpopulation where there's really strong, solid stripes. But there aren't different species, and it's not necessarily correlated with age, but I have noticed in my experience at least, and especially in the Eastern Cape where I used to see quite a lot of eland, like a lot of them, I would find that the younger individuals, it was a little bit more easy or a little bit more vivid. And this is kind of a stretch, honestly, because I've seen old individuals with very distinct stripes. I've seen young individuals with very faint stripes. Um, so actually, I don't think this thought stands at all. But the variation is almost like individualistic. Each individual can have different types of stripes. Now, the key here is that the stripes do still exist because those stripes can really assist in breaking up the outline of an eland in the bush. Now, when you are in the bush and say that you're trying to spot animals, it is so obvious when you spot something that is solid. It is so, so, so obvious. It almost stands out as something that is not, shouldn't be there. It's so obvious. But when you have stripes, spots, variations in the color of your coat, things that can play tricks on your eyes, it really, really helps because you're not sure whether you're looking at the middle, the end, the beginning of an animal's body. So the key thing here, regardless of whether the elands have faint or solid white stripes, is that the stripes do exist. But yes, Caro, I have also seen individuals where you're like, that eland has no stripes at all. But then if you have a closer look or the eland comes closer to you, you will see faintest stripes. And now our patient, Wonton, has moved away. Kara, just to end off that discussion in Eland, I think it's also important to note that there are two different species of eland, but the ones that we see on our cameras are common elands. The other eland is the giant eland, and that's kind of central West Africa. Oh, Mindy, you say you've got a pic of one of the Gerenooks when you were in Kenya. Aren't they just amazing? I find them so interesting. And I think it's also because so many of the animals I'm used to seeing. So obviously the first time you see something, it's very exciting. Um, and so Gerenooks just fascinate me now. They're just so interesting looking. And their faces are so small. Their bodies are so much bigger than their faces. They are incredibly interesting. Karu, you say you have not seen the word tragalaphid before. What is it? So we use the word tragalaphid to refer to a species of antelope that is in the tribe Tragalaphini. I hope that means something to you. But so tragalaphid, or an animal, an antelope in the tribe Tragalaphini, is a spiral horned antelope. So if we say a tragalaphid, we are referring to any of the species of spiral horned antelope. So the most, well, I suppose, yeah, elands are tragalaphids. Their horns are spiraled. Kudu, good examples of tragalaphid antelope or spiral horned antelope. Now, antelope tribes in and of themselves are strange kind of classes of animals. It's not really taxonomic, or like it's not really phylogenetic, so it's not particularly related to genetic relationships, though there is some of that, but not entirely like you would with strict taxonomic rules. So tribes are a really interesting Yeah, really interesting thing that we've managed to group animals by. Um, and also, canids also have tribes, which I found quite interesting. A bushbuck is another triglyphid, so it just refers to that that tribe of antelope. Hello, guys, we're talking about you. So from here, it kind of looks like none of them have stripes, but here we have two stripes on this side. Usually they can be really, really faint. And if we have a closer look at the one on the right, you start to see more stripes. Now, I would think that those animals or those individuals that have very, very faint stripes that we, can barely detect, that kind of tells me that the stripes are not particularly useful to them, or rather, their um, their survival has not been highly impacted by by whether they have stripes or not. So what that means is that in terms of their genetics and their evolution and their biology, those those stripes may not mean anything at all. And so it's kind of not in in the level of importance. Maybe it's not high up. Whereas some animals, like for example a tiger, if you get a tiger with no stripes, I'm not sure I've ever seen a tiger with no stripes. Anyway, in comes a Thompson's gazelle. I think there are some animals for which their markings make a huge difference to their survival, whether survival in terms of their ability to hunt or survival in terms of their ability to get away from a hunter or a predator. And you can also see that all these eland, there was like a really large individual, this one closest to the Thompson's gazelle. Its belly is very round and swollen. My gut would say that she's probably pregnant. But there's a couple different age groups here. Now, I am by no means able to age eland. I'm really can't. But just looking at them, their builds, their heights are a little different. But yet each one has slight variation in those stripes, or perhaps a complete lack of stripes, at least from our view. So I don't think it's correlated. Oh, you're welcome, Karu. It's always interesting to get your questions. Something I found interesting with eland that I haven't had a chance to research is that out of all the antelope species I've seen, eland are the ones that tend to have the most like variation in their horns. Oftentimes, their eland with skew horns or not quite symmetrical horns. And I've really not seen that in other antelope to that extent. I wonder why that could be. I may see an impala every now and then with a broken horn, but not a horn that looks okay. I've seen at least one impala that had a horn that looked as if it had grown weirdly from birth. But other than that, the only asymmetry I see with horns in antelope is a result of breakage. But with eland, it seems like some have more twist, like one horn is more twisted than the other, or one is more forward than the other. Um, One is bendy and one is more straight. And I don't mean variation between individuals. Yes, there is a high level of that too. But I mean even variations between the two horns that are growing on a single individual. I think that's quite interesting. Well, I think some more are coming down as well. At the rate that one tusk here is drinking water, the Saldonio waterhole will need to be replenished quite soon. I was about to say it's been a while since we've seen any predators at this camera, at this waterhole. But then I'm reminded that every time we have, or I've seen predators at this waterhole, it's almost always been during wild moments, not during the Africam show, because of the time of day. But I wonder if the striped hyena has been back. You know, Africam community who I've also been wondering about? Bob from Kalamazoo. What's happened to Bob from Kalamazoo? If you ever talk to him, tell him that we miss him during Africam show and wild moments. See, I do remember all of you. I think I have your usernames kind of like burned into my into my brain. Oh, thank you, Kirsten. Kirsten said that you have been seeing the striped hyena, which is fantastic. Oh, we've got some baboons at the back there too. Oh, it's all happening. Now, Aldonio is so... It feels greener than most of the cams down in South Africa. But having recently been in this Chulu landscape, I can tell you that the majority of it is probably really, really, really dry. Very little grass. But these acacias or Senegalias, and I think they're mellifera, but I'm not sure. But they seem to stay green. But almost all the other vegetation is pretty brown. But again, we know as soon as the rains come, the slightest bit of moisture just sets off a chain of events that just regreens massive areas. Hey Spas, you'd like to know which gazelle species to me has the most beautiful horns? How could you make me choose? I do think that impalas have stunning horns. Of course, there's the kudu, very, very impressive horns. But the humble impala does it for me. Anyway, everyone, thank you for joining us for the Africam show. Stay tuned, keep watching the different cameras, explore some of the new cameras. We haven't had a chance to head over to Botswana to um, hyena pan or hyena dam. But maybe next time, but you can go and explore. Enjoy African wildlife, and I hope that you have a fantastic time. Thank you again for your questions and your comments, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.